And we're live. Welcome everyone to another NPM Open RFC call. Thanks everybody for joining. I see that we've got Wes, Corey, and Jordan joining us today, and hopefully some more folks will join. Just quickly, there is a Google Doc for meeting notes that I've shared in the chat. Feel free to add yourselves as attendees. Claudia's kindly said that she'll take notes for today's meeting, which is awesome. And just a couple housekeeping notes. We are live on YouTube, so be mindful of what you say, and also these calls and all of the scores that we have on RFCs is essentially protected under a code of conduct. So feel free, there's a reference in that doc as well to familiarize yourself with that. And essentially the intention and desired outcomes of these calls is to, again, create a communication channel for the community to give us feedback, present ideas, and hopefully move discussions, issues, RFCs, PRs forward. And hopefully over time, we'll get better and better at running these. So the agenda is listed there. Again, we try to generate it as early as possible. It was automated, and that automation seems to have broken, so it's still being manually generated, unfortunately. So the first item essentially in the agenda is identifying a poll. So if folks haven't already, please jump into that issue and vote for essentially another call that we're going to be setting up, which was a great idea by Wes to do deep dives on topics which, there's a pretty large backlog right now of issues and RFCs that we'd love to get into. And so we're queuing up for next week a deep dive on workspaces specifically. I know we have it as an agenda item today, so we'll allow for folks to discuss that here, but we'll time box it and let folks know that we're going to go deep into the weeds there next week. And I think Roy's going to lead that call as he's been essentially quarterbacking the initiative there on our end. So just be mindful, if you can, jump into that issue 105 and vote for the time slot you'd like to see. Unfortunately, Wednesdays are the only sort of free time slot that we have for most of the NPM team, based on other internal meetings and activities that we have that have sort of blocked us on other days. So yeah, without further ado, I'd love to jump to the first actual RFC in the agenda, unless other folks have items they want to pull up first. This is essentially the RFC for workspaces that Roy's been working on, I know with you, Wes, and Jordan to some extent. I don't know if, Roy, you want to sort of kick this discussion off, and we'll time box it for, let's say, 10 minutes if we go to that. You can also note that we're going to go even deeper into the weeds there. We may want to also just punt this to next week if most folks on here can actually make that call.
Yeah, do we even want to get started? Because
it's
if we're doing the deep dive next week.
If we're doing deep dive, then we can do that. I was just put it on here again, just in case folks can't make it next Wednesday. So is anybody on here, Jordan, Corey, that you don't think you might be able to make it next, or Wes, do you think you can make the call next week? Yeah. Okay.
I plan to, but I will be traveling, so if anything happens, I might not, which would be unfortunate. But I definitely plan to.
Okay, that's good to know. We'll try to make sure that's scheduled for a time that you can join. Okay, so yeah, we won't go into that right now. Again, we're going to do that call. It looks like right now the 2 p.m. time slot again is sort of winning out, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So it'll probably be at the same time, same place, same links, et cetera, et cetera. So moving on. So RFC number 96, add publish confirmation prompt. I think we maybe discussed this a little bit in the last call, but Roy, I'm not sure if you had any update on this or whether or not we want to take this off the agenda.
Yeah, I think maybe it's fair to just like take it out for a while, at least.
Is this blocked by anything, essentially?
Where we landed last meeting was that one of the fundamentals in the RFC like is not really there. The fact that the CLI is not really aware if the two-factor auth is enabled or not, right? So it should be at least kind of like corrected, revised before approving or doing anything else with it, right?
Okay. So should I remove the agenda label then?
Yeah.
And let's say needs discussion. And can you take the action to update that RFC then?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Cool. So moving on, the RFC issue number 95. So save peer flag. The last person to comment on this, I think, was Jordan. But again, this was brought up by you, Roy. Did you want to speak to this a bit? Sorry, this is our RFC, so yeah.
Yeah, it didn't materialize as an actual RFC yet, but this came up when me and Jordan were talking about workspaces. I think he just dropped from the call, but yeah, would be nice to have his input. But basically, he was bringing up to our attention that like a very important aspect of workspaces is having things working together, and peer dependence is a big part of that. So it is basically about providing a better interface for those peer dependencies from the CLI, right?
So you're hoping, or go ahead. Yeah.
Can you currently do --save peer? Is that a flag?
No, yeah,
that right?
was the suggestion. Yeah, that is the original idea, but we need to develop it more, right, and integrate that in the context of the new workspaces, right? That was the main point.
Yeah, was there an like upfront what's the word I'm looking for, like challenge that you guys talked about with this particular thing? Because it seems to me from just like glancing that this shouldn't be something that's difficult. Like this should exist. It seems great.
No, yeah, there was definitely, he definitely gave great examples on the code bases he managed. Like, I think he had like the example of Enzyme that has a bunch of React peer dependencies and how he would like to manage them all together from the top level of that workspace, right?
So I want to tease this one apart. I'm hearing like three kind of different, somewhat interrelated issues here. The first is, you know, absent anything about anything else about workspaces, whatever, should we have some kind of flag that says save it as a peer dependency, just like we do for dev and optional and bundled and regular prod dependencies? And I think the uncontroversial answer there is yeah, we should. The thing that's already implemented in Arborist is kind of in anticipation of this, and I think even in the V7 beta branch that we've been working on, where we're kind of working on that epics for the initial V7 updates, we actually have save peer as a thing. I don't think it's documented yet, but it's, you know, the implementation is there. Now, the thing is, like, the way we have it is like the simplest possible implementation. It's just if you do save peer, it's just like save dev. We put it in, you know, as a peer dependency with the same kind of save prefix and save logic that we have for anything else. Now, the question should really be, and so that's the first issue. I think we should just all thumbs up that and say, yeah, we should have a save peer flag and it should save it as a peer. Easily done. The second thing is, should we make some changes to how we save things in general? And should there be a different way that we save peers versus dev dependencies, optional dependencies, prod dependencies? And the argument for this would be that it's kind of a different sort of thing, right? You frequently have a much broader dependency range on a peer dep than you do on a regular dependency. It's pretty common for people to use like greater than equals or multiple different version ranges, right? Like, because conflicts there are such a huge pain in the ass. If I have one package that depends on React version 16.2 and another one that depends on peer depends on React 16.3, I can't use those things together. Now, in practice, they probably both just work with React 16 of any version. And so, we might want to either enforce or encourage that when people are doing save peer that we're not too restrictive with the version range that we add there. The other thing is, if you save a Git dependency as your peer dependency, that can also lead to some conflicts, because your package that saves the Git dep as a peer dependency is going to have to get it from that Git repo, and something else will potentially have to get the version. Now, if the Git repo resolves to that version, you're fine. But if you're only telling it like, I want this Git repo, then by default, that's going to pull like whatever the default branch is, usually master or sometimes latest. And it's essentially like a greater than equal dependency, except it's one that can't be easily backed away from. So if you depend on that Git repo, we have to pull it from that Git repo. If something else is depending on a version range, then there's no easy way to say, okay, what's the Git ref that satisfies this version range, right? Unless they're using like Semver tagging or something like that, and the logic gets a lot more complicated. So there has been some desire to say that peer dependencies have to be a version range rather than a Git dep or something else. And so that's kind of a whole other interesting conversation around peer deps and how we save them. The third question here is how should peer dependencies be handled in a workspace? And I would push for punting that until next week.
Yeah.
That's a big question, and it's really very workspace specific. It's not really specific to peer deps or saving them.
Yeah. Mike, you had your hand up. Was there a comment you want to make?
I think it's mostly moot now, but I was going to say that resolution that you're talking about, Isaac, about a Git dependency, it's a similar resolution to, it's not the same, but a similar resolution to bundle dependencies, is it not? Like, you wouldn't know whether the thing satisfies whatever you're looking for until you actually have that thing with you, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, the difference is that a bundle dependency, we can safely assume that whatever's been bundled is what the package author wanted, right? Because it's what they had when they published it.
Yeah, I just mean like of another, because I think my question's good, but yeah, it's a concern that would have to be figured out in the resolution of dependencies. Yeah.
So I think, like, I just went and thumbed this up, but it probably makes sense for somebody to, again, quarterback maybe the first thing, essentially. Like, it makes sense for us to just have that flag exist.
Yeah, I can make the RFC for the CLI should support -f save peer.
That's awesome.
I don't think that, honestly, I don't even think that needs to really be an RFC. Like,
it's very uncontroversial. It could be an issue, a backlog
let's just
issue.
let's just backlog it on the CLI and say,
okay,
npm v7 should support save peer, and like, honestly,
because we've already had that discussion.
Like,
we've already had that. Yeah, exactly. So makes sense.
We kind of snuck it in there already. So
cool.
Approved.
Pretty much, yeah. Cool. And if you can, Mike, whatever issue that you backlog, can you just reference it in this our RFC, and then we can.
I'm leaving a note there about the
Okay.
discussion we just had.
Thanks, Ray. Cool. Any other feedback on that? Pretty straightforward. Awesome. Let's move on then. So item number 6, issue number 93. Standardized browser-based login mechanism. I know we had a pretty good discussion about this in the last RFC call. Amelia's not on the call today, but just want to maybe follow up on if Isaac, did you have any context of where we've landed with this? I know there was some like discussion about this is something we want to do, like standardizing, you know, OAuth or whatever it is that we decide.
Yeah, I did have occasion to go and touch that code in npm profile pretty recently as part of our
Right.
npm v7 update, and also interesting, if extremely difficult to pull off security issue, possible, you know, hypothetical security issue that we addressed. But so yeah, I think the long and short of it is like, it's really not hard to do. We should do it. It's just a matter of kind of prioritizing the work. There are some open questions still as far as you know, and I'd like to get to an RFC that has some of those questions answered. I don't think any of them are hard. Most of them are somewhat arbitrary, right? It's just like, what is the endpoint? There's something else. What kind of token we send back, or refresh token we send back, and so on. And then somebody's just going to have to quarterback the, you know, take on the work of implementing that in npm profile. And from the point of view of the CLI, it should be mostly just agnostic, right? The CLI just calls profile.login and responds to whatever, you know, passes the prompt technique and the browser name and everything.
Yeah, while you were doing that work, I did uncover some legacy docs around the original auth flow, which also had like some pictures of whiteboards, etc., which seemed to, I think, almost reference like what was presented here. So I'm not sure if we never fully baked, like we had started some work down this. I'm not sure if you have the historical context there, Isaac, but was there at one point, like, were we trying to do this?
So the OAuth 2 device, what is it? Oh, device flow did not exist when we implemented this. There was a, you know, in a corporate environment, you typically want to have some kind of single sign-on system for your npm usage, and there's a number of ways to do this. The simplest and the worst is you out of band do a login, mint a token, and copy and paste it into your npm RC file. As a way to get around that, npm legacy, npm enterprise legacy, the on-prem sort of install and run yourself kind of software product, had a very much a kludge implementation where it does the kind of CouchDB style login, but with this special flag that tells the registry, oh, like, this is actually SSO, and so it passes this dummy user account name. And then that returns a URL that you have to open, and then it keeps pinging on the who am I endpoint in order to see like when you've been logged in. But it gives you a token, and then you go and out of band, you make that token valid by logging in. This is not super secure. You should never have a token issued which is not valid, right? It should be the case that you're not issued a token until the moment that it becomes valid. So we called that out, we refactored it, and for the npme SaaS implementation, we did it a different way, and we spec'd out this thing. So you hit an endpoint, the server says, here's the URL to log in, and here's the URL to ping to get your token once the login completes, right? And then npm opens up a web browser to the login URL, you do your thing. At some point, that kind of becomes valid, and the server that's been getting pinged at this done URL returns, okay, here's the token. Or if the login is canceled or whatever, it cancels it and kills the session. This also, the other nice thing about this is it unifies the login and add user flows, because you have, or it keeps them united, I guess, where currently that's kind of problematic. You have them, if you open up your web browser and you don't actually have a login account, or you're not currently logged in, it can say, oh, go through the create account flow, and whatever flow the browser process takes you through, it always knows it's for this particular session. And when that completes, you get the token. It also allows you to do things like say, I want this device that I'm logging in on, I want it only to have access to X, Y, and Z, or from this CIDR range, or it should be read only, whatever. So some years went by, and in the intervening time, there was a spec that was written, which is close, but not identical to what we're currently doing. And there's some nice features. One of the nicest security features that's added, I think the only relevant security feature that was added was the use of refresh tokens. So what that means is the token that you get, the login token you get, is only valid for some short period of time. Say like an hour. And you also get a refresh token. And this refresh token can be used to mint a new login token. And the reason why this is valid is, or why this is useful, is that if a man-in-the-middle attack, sniffs your NPM login token and starts using it, then they only have access for a short window of time, and then that login token is no longer valid. And if somebody sniffs your refresh token and then reloads the token with a new one, well, now your current one no longer works, right? Because every time the refresh token gets used, there's some signal there.
Right.
So it gives us a little bit more kind of ongoing assurances about logins. But anyway, doing all this non-zero amount of work.
So I'm just thinking, what are the actions to take against this specifically? Or do we pull it off the agenda and just say that it needs to be prioritized, backlogged?
I think the action to pull off of this is let's get those let's get those questions answered, get a proper opinionated spec that says do it this way, and then make it a backlog of work for the npm login project. And okay. I think Amelia had said that she'd be willing to even take that on, but there does need to be, we do need to document it.
Okay. Good. Okay, so I've just pulled it off the agenda label for now, add it to backlog, and we can follow up in the issue itself. Moving on. RC number 92, or issue number 92, add staging workflow for CI and human interoperability. And I noticed that Demetrius actually joined, who's essentially being the champion of this. Well, in the package maintenance working group has been the champion there. I think the last person to comment though was Wes, so I'm not sure if you can provide any context or an update on where that conversation's at.
I don't have much to add other than what's going on in the issue, and I think there's a lot of open questions. I think this would be worthy of a deep dive at some point. So where I left off was basically trying to push for this don't put it in package lock and package JSON. And I think, Isaac, you brought up a lot of really good points, but I still ultimately think I disagree, and I think that it shouldn't be. But I going over all of those points here probably is not worth our time. There's a lot to read in that issue.
So what we could do is, it seems like we need a new label, needs deep dive, which I think is accurate. I think that's probably right, Wes. We could probably spend an hour fleshing out the details here. So we'll do our best, I think, to queue up the right amount of detail for a call. Let's say that this will be the fast follow after the Workspaces deep dive.
So I was gonna, I just want to add, I completely agree with Wes about how we are not in agreement. And
you agree about the disagreement.
We have agreed to, well, we haven't agreed to continue disagreeing, but we agreed that we currently disagree.
Yeah, we are in yeah, agreed.
I think that the other reasoning for making this a deep dive topic is that I think this is a feature or an idea where we're sort of hitting a lot of different use cases, and those use cases are not identical with this particular feature. And I think that's fine, right? That's normal and that happens. But it does make the conversation a little bit more complicated, because we can't just trivially say, well, does this or does this not meet this particular sort of discrete set of use cases? And I want to make sure that when we're doing this, we're doing something that's not just going to kind of serve the interests of large organizations that are publishing a lot of packages and want to add some additional checks into their workflow, but also serves the interests of like large open source projects that are doing a similar kind of thing. So there's there are the needs of the Netflixes and IBMs of the world, and then there's also the needs of the the Babels and the Lodashes and the NYCs and the Stambles. And I want to make sure if we have one feature that hits at least the 80% case of those things, and then we have an additional thing that sort of layers on top of that, or provides a backbone for an additional thing that meets either the corporate or the open source needs on top of that kind of overlap of functionality, then I think that would be a good thing to try and shoot for.
Corey, you have your hand up. I apologize if that was from the last discussion.
Nope, that's from this. So I just wanted to mention about my comment. When I initially saw this RFC, I kind of saw this as a way to, with NYC, what we have is NYC has its own repo, and the Istanbul libraries that it builds upon are in a mono repo. And one of the pains of the workflow is that I can't test NYC against patches to Istanbul without publishing to Next. And when I initially saw this, I kind of saw an opportunity to essentially push it on the side. Part of the issue is that I can't do an npm install from Git of a subdirectory. And that's something that I had discussed with Isaac offline, that that would be an alternative that would work for me, is if I could say that NYC needs to use a dependency from a folder within a mono repo. In that case, I probably wouldn't need the staged feature, to be honest.
Right. Mike, you have your hand up?
Yeah, that's very interesting that you say that, Corey. So there is a ticket on, I don't think it's hosted Git info. I think it's on the CLI proper that we've punted from a couple of releases, or RFC meetings rather, that is specifically installing from a subdirectory at Git. It's that commitish issue. I don't know if you recall, Darcy. And so it's effectively saying that I would like to give it a Git URL with this commitish that points to a folder in a GitHub thing repo, and then inside that folder will be a package JSON that you can then read and stuff, and that becomes sort of the pacument of the thing. But there's currently no such Git spec for it, so we'd be inventing something. And so I think that's the reason that it's sort of fallen to the bottom of the list. But yeah, it would be interesting if that solves some of the use cases, then also perhaps stage, to Isaac, to your point, perhaps we can find a balance between these two things that'll solve like 80% or the whole thing, depending on the use cases.
Yeah, I don't know where that issue is at right now, but I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
I just posted it in chat. It's 528.
Oh, awesome.
By issue.
No, I'm thinking of a different one. Let me see if I can take it up.
But this is specifically what you were speaking to, I guess, Corey. Yeah. If we solve for that, then we solve for that use case. Okay.
Or at least we lessen some of the pressure on it for sure. Where currently there's no ability to do it, there would be some ability to do it. We could still have the conversation about whether it's better or worse or whatever.
Yeah, and looking at issue 528, the suggested URL that they used won't work because we can't disambiguate. At one point, I kind of looked into, there are specific characters that are basically not allowed to be commit-ish or branch names. So I think we would have to use one of those as a token to separate the branch from kind of additional parameters. So you would install, get URL, hash symbol, branch, and then maybe another hash symbol and directory equals or what have you. So I think we would have to intentionally do something that is not directly a valid URL.
Yeah, I think this is just this just needs to be spec'd out in an RFC. It can be a short RFC, and it'll probably be somewhat uncontroversial. It's just we need to have that written down, and then everybody thumbs up it, and the implementation is probably pretty easy in the posted Git info repo.
Does anybody want to take that on? Corey, Mike?
I'll just add that. So I posted the link to the issue that I was referring to. It has 3 reference links or 4 reference links in it, and a few of them have interesting suggestions for what the URL could be. And according to your point, I think some of them are like characters that aren't valid URLs, URL characters.
Any takers? Quick RFC? Get consensus? Use cases? No? Nobody wants to do it?
Sorry, it took me a minute to get to the unmute. I'll try and make some time to look into that this week.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Cool. Moving on then, and we'll identify, it should be identified that we should do a deep dive on just the rest of that RFC specifically for staged releases or staged package publish workflow. Item 8, RFC number 90, reduce lifecycle script environment size. I know that there was some, we've talked about this before, and Isaac, I know that you have commented in this before. Where are we at with this? I think you already gave an update in the last RC call. I'm not sure if anything has changed.
Yeah, I did. I don't think anything has changed. There are some implementation details that we're going to be going through and doing. As far as the the package specific information that we put into the environment, that's all currently already handled by Arborist, and I've been using that to install stuff here and there. It seems to work actually for all of the packages that are that were referenced. The place where it does get a little bit more involved is just having the CLI set everything in the CLI's environment when it spins up, which will then be inherited by the child process. And we need to port everything from using npm lifecycle to using at npm cli/run script.
So is there anything blocking us from ratifying this?
I don't think so. Unless there's any like pending edits. That would be the only thing I might think. If there's like pending edits and what we're doing right now is not actually matching what's in the text of the RFC, but I can get on that today.
Yeah, Jordan's just correcting your spelling is all he's done. So
Potentially.
Potentially, you'll fix that at some point. Cool. That's great then. Potentially, we can actually ratify that then today if you get a chance, because I think that's uncontroversial-ish. Like you've identified what like the convention of the names aren't changing, right? For this, like the npm underscore, like that's all the same, right? npm underscore config underscore.
Yeah.
Just less things now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just way fewer of them, and it's not, none of the stuff from the package would get put in the environment except the package URL.
It might just be good to,
Oh, sorry, the package file name.
yeah, it might be good just to pull like userland in case there's, like Jordan noted that he does utilize some piece of like some information. What else would we essentially be taking away that people have access to? So like
I mean,
the argv is a good example.
Yeah, argv is a great example. It was kind of never there intentionally. It's just sort of an accident of the fact that we're just dumping the object without a lot of thought behind it. It's really hard to say because it's such a shotgun blast of environment variables. It's not really clear like which ones are essential and which ones aren't. I'd be really surprised if anybody's using like npm underscore package underscore authors underscore 17, right? Like that's actually not very useful. But I think that there's name or description. Like the only place I've seen somebody use npm package description as an environment variable to know what to do was a malware attack that was trying to target Coinbase.
Right.
It's sort of like, I don't know. I don't think there's any valid use case for it, to be honest. And I'm always sort of suspicious when I hear other people say that, so I can understand getting some pushback on saying that there's no valid use case. But like, honestly, we've looked and the only thing we found is this is install or is publish repo, which, if we just say like this, look, this is the command we're running.
Yep.
Then actually that's a way better way to determine
It's gonna be way
than by
faster.
looking at argv anyway.
Yeah, it's gonna be way faster. Cool. Okay, so we can pull that off then, take off the agenda label and get hopefully that ratified then later today, if you've got time or sometime this week. Awesome, moving on. Sign documents. I'm not sure Wes doesn't be able to join in a while. I'm not sure. Will, sorry.
Yeah, Will said he was going to join, but then didn't. And I was chatting with him like an hour ago, so I know he's awake and alive. But I did want to ask, are there any things that I can follow up on with him and or other folks who want this to move it forward?
I think this is essentially just blocked. Like I think we are, I could be wrong. Like I'm at least on board with this change. But I think if I remember correctly, Isaac, you hesitated because of maybe the overhead that this is going to create for install. Like, like sign documents. I forget if you remember that discussion we had when we first talked about this.
I remember the discussion, and I have not followed up on it, but
this is definitely, I don't know, Wes, to your point, to your question specifically, I don't think there's anything that would like move this forward beyond, but like for sure this would get backlogged with the like our internal infra teams and registry teams.
So I think that part of it is, there's two parts, right? So there's the CLI implementation part, which is just implementing, fetching the signature if it exists, and then validating it. Mm-hmm. Can that move forward independently of npm providing signatures for all the packages, right?
And that's what I think need Isaac probably just to follow up, I think, because he had strong feelings, I think, on that.
That'll end up getting wound into Arbor or Bacoche, right?
Yeah, I don't know if like do the full install and then validate all the signatures is necessarily the best or most efficient approach. It may actually be more efficient to, immediately upon downloading, gosh, there's some leads here.
Yeah, to be clear here though, I think he's in the section where he says do the install first, that's an alternative approach if it was done via external tooling. I think the goal would be that it is, like you were saying, part of the install process.
Right, and that may actually be more efficient because then we can be doing that in parallel while we're downloading or resolving other dependencies.
Yeah, like I think that if the signature failed,
it'd be like
then,
it could be treated like an integrity fail.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
That's-
So it
yeah,
would then
that's-
fail to then do the rest of the resolution on that tree and probably abort the whole install.
The problem there, or the potential gotcha there, is just we're looking at 2 downloads now instead of 1, right? And if the and I want to make sure that if we're adding some that much overhead, which is a lot of overhead, right? We're talking about doubling install times potentially on an empty cache.
Well, to be clear here, it's two factors there. One is it should be done in parallel to fetching the pacument, right? Or it's part of, actually, never mind. Let me take one step back. It's not even 2 requests in one of his proposals here, which is to have it returned as a header on the pacument itself. Right? So it's just the 1 request for the pacument. It would just be that the pacument would include the signature in like he proposed X npm signature header.
Yeah, we didn't put an X on it, but so I want to be clear on like what exactly we are. What exactly is the threat model that we are targeting with this? So you want to be able to have the signature of the entire pacument signed with the author's keys. Okay, 2 big problems with that.
No, not author's keys, registry keys.
Registry key.
Yeah.
Right. So this is your registry key would sign the pacument saying that the contents of the pacument, which because the integrity check is based on a value from the pacument, we actually can't really trust today if there's anybody sitting in between us and the registry, right? Which, so man in the middle attack is sort of the part of the vector, but also as registry proxies, are very popular. Technically, you don't have any trust mechanism for the registry proxy today at all.
So let's say then so then signing the pacument feels like an unnecessary step then, right? If we're not worried about, if we're just talking about the registry key, if I have a signature of the pacument and I've man in the middle the registry, and I'm the one giving you the pub key, I can just give you my pub key and my signature of it. Like, you haven't actually protected against the man in the middle attack at the registry.
Presumably you would have stored, interesting. Okay. You would have the pub key. You'd probably have to get it out of band, right? So that's where,
right.
Like, I think what they're saying in the proposal here, the signature key in this example on line 42 of this lives in Keybase, right? So,
right, which it currently does for tarball signatures.
Right, so you'd have to man in the middle both, right?
Yeah,
which is do the attack.
Right. So I think a good sort of next step on this, rather than just adding more signatures to more places, we have let's say you get the npm registry key from Keybase today, and then and we add the capability to check the signatures of the integrity values that are in the pacument today. If we do that without any additional work on the registry side, but just that's entirely a CLI change. If we do that, then I can, let's say I man in the middle the registry, I can't actually serve you an invalid tarball because the integrity is going to be different and there will be an invalid signature of it, right? And I can't fake that signature because I can't get the registry's private key.
Okay, so what if? Yeah, okay. I think
So-
that's
so
fine.
my
What about
question
also more than just trying to serve an invalid tarball? What about serving an invalid package metadata? Right. So saying a version exists that doesn't exist, or something to that effect.
Right, or filtering out a version.
Yeah, exactly, right. So filtering out a version that is a security fix that you're relying on to exploit, right?
So the problem here is that that gets in the way of people who are currently filtering out versions that have security vulnerabilities that they know about.
Right, but they're doing that at a registry proxy layer. So this would actually, they would then be able to provide a key for their registry proxy, right, which would be doing this pacument altering. So that's actually an important feature here. They would then be able to validate that the pacument they got is the one that their registry proxy generated, not the one from public NPM, because they're relying on it not being the one from public NPM, right?
Right. Well, so my only thing is then the CLI, the users of that registry proxy would have to know to get the key for that registry proxy out of band.
Yeah, definitely. Right. But
They'd
I think
they'd have to add that to their allowed keys set. Okay, so that's
exactly, that would be the intent, right? Because then the people who are running the proxy can just tell their users, hey, add this. Now you know that you're always, you can add it to your global NPM RC, and that would effectively mean that they can't accidentally call to public NPM if they're not intended to do so, right?
Right. So any registry proxy essentially needs to, and I didn't see this called out, but just to sort of highlight the thing we just said. Any registry proxy in a signed pacument world, any registry proxy has to either strip the signature from the header, or they have to provide their own signature, which the user has added to their NPM RC out of band. Or they need to commit to never changing the pacument. Right. So
yes,
if you change the pacument,
yeah,
you must either sign it yourself or strip the signature.
Yep.
And I think they all have to change the pacument, don't they? So that maybe is able to be left off. Am I wrong on that?
They don't all have to be able to change the pacument. Right? You could be proxying and just proxying so that you can have your own private packages, but anything public just comes from the registry.
Yeah, so the tarball locations don't change, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Or add support information.
But I guess the only thing that I'm bringing up as a concern, and I don't think there's no way to address it, but it's a concern that would have to be addressed if we were to move forward with this, is that added complexity in running your own proxy. It would be a non-zero amount more work to run a registry proxy.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an insurmountable. It's just that is an additional thing they'd have to do.
Well, have to again is they can optionally do. So part of what it says in here is that this would only happen, these checks would only be added if you enabled these in your npm RC or whatever configuration method you're using.
Yeah,
so
I have kind of a problem with that. If there's something that makes the open source community more secure and successful, it should be opt out rather than opt in.
I totally agree. I guess I was trying to see this as that would be a first step, and then you could maybe flip the default later once the public registry has all the signatures in place, right?
So the other thing where I just to get back to what is the delta in the threat model between what a signed pacument protects you from versus what signed versions, signed artifacts protect you from, and the only delta is really a modification in which packages are available. I guess since we rely on corgis, you could do some weird malicious stuff, like you could add a scripts block or something to the corgi doc, which then at install time we don't recheck. No, we do for scripts.
Just the time
I don't
boxes.
know. This is sorry. I know I'm rambling.
Just I want to make sure that we got to Corey has 2 items here, PR 72 accept dependencies and package JSON, as well as the issue 506 for NPM audit. I wanted to make sure we got to those since the next item, essentially the prompt for module type. I think that is an update that I can give quickly there. We've been looking to try to get the create-package PKG package name freed up and given back to the package.js package maintenance working group, so package.js org, which I think will solve for or provide a means of allowing some sort of userland tooling to solve for, let's say, the module prompt. So I think that's like an update there, and I'll actually add an update in the actual ticket itself. But if we can quickly move on from the signed documents RFC to, I don't know which one you'd like to get to with the time left, Corey. Which one's more important to you, I guess, for accept dependencies or the NPM audit places false blame? I'll give you the floor if either one is more important to try to get to with the last 5 minutes.
I'm not really sure. I mean, they're both pretty important to me. The goal of accept dependencies is somewhat the same as Yarn's resolutions feature. The big difference is that as a consumer of some package, I don't necessarily know that that package is compatible with an updated version of the script, but the author knows if it's compatible or not. And in the situation where the author's holding back the dependency to support old node.js versions, I'd like for them to have the ability to publish a package that will allow my program to run with latest stuff in current versions of node.js. So the idea is that if I install an application that has many dependencies, if one of my dependencies has an updated version and another dependency requires an old version but allows the new version, then I want everything to deduplicate to just use the new version. My understanding from Isaac is this feature has been implemented in Arborist, so I guess I'm just looking to see if anybody has objections to this idea.
Is that accurate, Isaac? Is that actually solved for?
From what I remember, oh, go ahead, Isaac. Go ahead.
Let's ratify it. It's good. It works.
Cool.
NPM 7 has it. It's going to do this.
Okay. Awesome. So I can pull that off or by saying ratify.
Like, let's move it over to the implemented folder and just mention that it's going to be in NPM 7.
Okay, I'm going to label it properly then. Awesome. Okay, let's. That's great then. Can you maybe speak to then, Corey? I know this has been on our agenda for a while now, and don't think you've been able to join until now. The bug or issue number 506 against the CLI, NPM audit places false blame. I'm not sure if you can speak to the specific situation or expectation, I guess.
Yes, I can. Less of an issue for NYC now that we no longer use handlebars, but in the past year or so, handlebars has had 4 or 5 vulnerable versions, and each one of them we get a half dozen bug reports and pull requests to update handlebars, and we use Semver ranges. All of the security fixes are in range, so there is no bug in NYC or any dependency. The bug is in the user's package JSON, or excuse me, package lock.json. So to me, the issue is that the NPM audit is naming NYC as the problem when it's not. The problem is, that user has an outdated and vulnerable package lock. That's essentially the issue.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a common the results you're talking about is a very specific case, but a very common problem is that the package lock, like transitives, are just out of date and there's no good guidance given like during any of the steps, the normal workflow steps that folks go through, that would tell them this, right? So like if they just said like at some point, oh, it looks like you're, you might want to take a look at your package lock because you've got a bunch of out-of-date transitives. Like none of the main processes people go through, when I say main process, I mean like npm install, right, indicate to them that they should take a look at it. So I found in projects like internally, especially when they haven't been touched in 6 months and somebody comes in, they're actually running tons of out-of-date stuff, right? And even if you ran so if you like, for example, take npm update on Express, you actually have to run it 3 times to get it to stop telling you that there's some out-of-date stuff. I actually think even on the 3rd time, it still has one package that it can't get up to date, and it's like, that's a pretty bad workflow. So maybe like looking at generally workflows around that might provide value in this specific case as well. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on that.
So a couple of things. First of all, npm update I believe it started in npm v5 and it's been the case in 5.6. npm update only updates your first level of dependencies, and it has this depth field that you can do to say, oh, go 1 layer deeper or whatever. Pretty common for people to do npm update -- depth equals 9999 or whatever. When I was getting into this with some brief history on that, it made sense back before we did any deduplication by default, because depth literally meant how deep into the folder tree are you. There was some actual thing that was depth. And then in npm v3, in order to try and sort of keep the same kind of impact, the depth now refers to the logical tree rather than the physical tree, or the logical graph, excuse me, rather than the physical tree. The problem there is that a graph doesn't have depth. A graph has distance. And calculating that distance is very, there's some arbitrary choices to be made there. So the result is essentially we've gotten ourselves to a point where npm update being limited by depth makes no sense, and there's no rational way to wrap your head around it. For npm v7, and I ran into this when trying to re-implement this in Arborist and just realizing like, wait a second, this is bonkers. So in npm v7, if you run npm update, it will update your whole tree. It'll be essentially the same as rmrf node modules, rm package lock JSON, npm install. But keeping the stuff that is not out of date. But essentially it just starts over, ignores your package lock, rebuilds the whole ideal tree, and then reifies it from your current state into that new state. And if you specify a name of a package name, it'll only update packages by that name that are out of date, and anything that those packages depend on or which depend on them, which is now in an invalid state, right? So it'll kind of start by updating all those things, and then anything that's no longer valid, it'll fix. So what this means is we can actually change our npm audit results to, instead of saying, oh, this is a problem with handlebars, and actually it's a problem with NYC, with tap stroke NYC stroke something else stroke Istanbul report stroke handlebars, right? In a way that makes it look like it's a tap or an NYC problem. And instead just say, this is a problem with handlebars. If you run npm update handlebars, the problem will be solved, right? And we will fix those problems in the package log.
So
and then
just to be mindful of time,
yeah.
Isaac, we're already 3 over. So
okay, so that's it.
Yeah.
But we can certainly take a pass at updating the UX around that.
Yeah, and suggested that this might be something that we could solve for before 7, with messaging maybe potentially.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky.
Phrased.
Yeah, we could change how it's phrased, but some of the suggestions make sense, but they're kind of a lot of work, and I'm trying to like procrastinate as hard as possible on anything with relating to npm 6.
Yep, I get it. We'll see what we can do though, and if we can follow up with some more comments in that thread, that'd be ideal. So again, I appreciate folks. We ran a few minutes over here. Also got kicked off a couple minutes late, so appreciate the patience. Again, feel free to give comments and feedback to us in the open poll that we have going for the alternating call. I think that's, again, ticket or issue 105. And I appreciate everybody jumping on today. Thanks for joining us. Ciao.
Everyone.